Hi guys, Forgotten Wolf here, and this is the 75k views special, The Life of Jaime Lannister. Before I begin, thank you guys so much for 75k views. I could not have done any of this without you. I never thought this was possible when I created this channel in December. This is absolutely incredible, so let's get into the special, The Life of Jaime Lannister. Jaime Lannister was born into House Lannister of Castle Rock in 261 AC in the show's continuity, and at first he was the heir to Castle Rock. His father was Tywin Lannister, and his mother was Joanna Lannister. And in 265 AC, at 4 years old, Jaime lost his mother when she died in childbirth, giving birth to Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion was born dwarf, and his father wanted to throw him into the ocean. However, Jaime Lannister convinced Tywin to spare Tyrion's life. At around age 9 or 10, in 270 or 271 AC, Jaime began an incestuous relationship with his twin sister, Cersei Lannister. Both Jaime and Cersei loved each other, although Cersei planned to ditch Rhaegar for, Jaime for Rhaegar. But this relationship would destroy Jaime's life, although it's implied that they tried to have sex before Tyrion's birth, had Joanna Lannister found out. Somehow Tywin never found out about Jaime and Cersei's relationship until season 4. However, they would split for a while as in 276 AC, Jaime Lannister would be named a Kingsguard by King Aerys, or the Mad King, in a move successfully pissing off Tywin and getting him to resign his hand. Jaime thought he would be with Cersei forever, as they thought she would marry Rhaegar. I might make a what if off that. Instead of Jaime serving Cersei, he ended up serving the Targaryens, the enemies of the Lannisters. For the next 5 years, Jaime Lannister would train in the King's Guard, and in 281 AC, he would finally take his vows as a member of the King's Guard in front of a lot of lords and ladies at the tourney of Harrenhal. Now, I'm not going to go too far into this. I've covered that enough. Basically, the tourney of Harrenhal, where Rhaegar crowned Lyanna Queen of Love and Beauty. But anyway, it would only be that night when Jaime was welcomed to the King's Guard where he realized he had named Tywin Lannister's son to the King's Guard and would be right beside him, and he could betray him at any moment. Jaime was then that night sent back to King's Landing to guard Queen Rhaella and Prince Viserys in a position that kept him from participating in Robert's Rebellion. In 281 AC, Robert's Rebellion broke out through the deaths of Brandon and Rickard Stark and the kidnapping of Lyanna Stark. Jaime wouldn't make his contribution to the war until the very end, where his father was sacking King's Landing, and the Mad King ordered the whole city be burnt to the ground. Jaime realized what was about to happen, as 500,000 innocents would die as they lived in King's Landing, and so Jaime killed the head pyromancer, and then he took his sword, went up to the Mad King, and killed him. Jaime Lannister became the Kingslayer, and Robert's Rebellion was shortly over. In the years after Robert's Rebellion, there would be great change in the realm. Jaime Lannister would surprisingly stay in the Kingsguard despite murdering his king, and he would watch as King Robert Baratheon married his sister, Queen Cersei Lannister. However, Cersei and Robert's relationship would be full of hatred for each other. Cersei then turned to Jaime, and they rekindled their old love relationship and finally became true lovers in the next 10 or so 17 years. The two would have 3 children, Joffrey, Marcella, and Tommen, and they were disguised as Robert's kids. Greyjoy's rebellion broke out in 291 AC, and Jaime would serve as one of Robert's top commanders in Robert's army, and he would help in the siege of Pike. But besides that, it was a time of peace in the realm, and this would end in 297 AC with the death of Jon Arryn. Now we are finally onto the Game of Thrones show, and it starts in 297 AC, where Jaime Lannister would travel as a part of King Robert's court to Winterfell. While King Robert was on the hunt in Winterfell one day, Jaime stayed to guard Cersei, and the two are having sex already. Surprise her, what a shock. However, Jaime and Cersei were caught having sex by Ned Stark's son, Bran. Jaime saw this, and he threw Bran out the window. This would have massive ramifications, as Ned Stark would grow to distrust the Lannisters even more, as Catelyn told Ned it was the Lannisters who threw Bran out of the tower. However, in 298 AC, upon hearing of Ned Stark's wife Catelyn Stark taking his brother Tyrion prisoner, Ned Stark would go to confront Ned Stark, killing all his men, while one of Jaime's men interfered with Jaime's plans and broke Ned Stark's leg. Jaime would then go into hiding at Castle Rock to escape charges, and that was until Robert Baratheon died, thanks to Cersei, and Ned Stark was imprisoned by King Joffrey. The War of the Five Kings had started, and Jaime was on the Lannister side, of course, fighting in several battles and winning his way to lay siege to Riverrun. This would lead into the Battle of Whispering Woods, the battle that would change Jaime's life, where Jaime's army would be broken and Jaime was taken captive by Robb Stark, and nobody thought he would leave the Starks alive. They thought he'd be executed. Crucially, Jaime was taken captive right before Ned Stark's execution, and plans were made to trade Ned for Jaime. However, King Joffrey, like the idiot he was, had Ned Stark executed, and that ends Jaime in Season 1 of Game of Thrones. Over the next 2 years / seasons in Game of Thrones, Jaime would be captive of the Starks, where after a failed escape he confessed to being in love with Cersei and that Joffrey, Marcella, and Tommen were his kids, and that he threw Bran at the tower. However, after the fall of Winterfell, Catelyn was blinded by grief and thought that trusting Jaime to bring his daughters home from King's Landing by releasing him from prison would happen. Yeah, huge fucking mistake. He would be escorted to King's Landing by Brienne of Tarth, but not before being taken captive by the Boltons. While captive of the Boltons, he would lose a hand, and you learned that Tywin's forces had won the Battle of Blackwater Bay and Cersei was still alive. In order to maintain good relations with the Lannisters, Roose Bolton released Jaime and had various people escort him back to King's Landing, but after Roose left, Jaime went back to Harrenhal and saved Brienne of Tarth, bringing her back to King's Landing with her. Finally, in 300 AC, the War of the Five Kings was over, with the death of Robb Stark at the Red Wedding, and Jaime arrived back in King's Landing, where he would be with Cersei again. The world had changed in just 2 years since Jaime was last in King's Landing. In Season 4, Jaime and Cersei would be divided a lot, as, they would be divided over various issues. Jaime was now fitted with a golden hand to replace the one he'd lost, but the main issue was that Cersei wanted Tyrion executed for supposedly poisoning Joffrey, but Jaime loved Tyrion, who once again stood accused of murdering King Joffrey at the Purple Wedding. Eventually, they reconciled after Tyrion's champion Oberyn Martell lost his trial by combat, and the two lovers were reconciled. However, Jaime didn't want to see his brother die, so he and Varys freed Tyrion, where Tyrion would go and kill Tywin Lannister, betraying Jaime's trust. In Season 5, Jaime felt really guilty over his part in his father's death, saying to Bronn that he would kill Tyrion if he saw him again. Speaking of Bronn, since Season 4, would be training Jaime to fight with his left hand over the next year. However, the faith militant would strike in the wake of Tywin Lannister's death and imprison Cersei, Marjorie, and Loras. And Jaime wouldn't free Cersei, although he was mad at the High Sparrow. Instead, after Cersei's Walk of Atonement, Jaime would take the Tyrell army and march to the Sept of Baelor, where he saw the king had become a puppet of the High Sparrow. Jaime had marched against the Crown, since the High Sparrow was now a huge member of the Crown now, so King Tommen had him out of the city, but not removed from the Kingsguard, as he was sent with the Lannister army to take Riverrun for the Freys, where over the next year, Jaime would be stuck at Riverrun taking the castle from the Tullys and taking it for the Freys. Eventually, Jaime took the castle, where he returned to King's Landing, where he would discover that all three of his and Cersei's children were dead, and Cersei was now queen. And in Season 7, Jaime would serve in King's Landing in the war against Daenerys, or the Targaryen Rebellion, as I like to call it, and Jaime would be sent to take Highgarden, where he would forfeit Castle Rock and get the gold of Highgarden in order to pay off the debt the Crown owed the Iron Bank, which was a huge amount. Jaime would also see Tyrion again, as Tyrion tasked Jaime with convincing Cersei to have a parlay to stop the war in favor of defeating the White Walkers. And they all agreed to pause the war to defeat the White Walkers. However, when Jaime was preparing the expedition north, Cersei revealed that she had no plans of sending her army north, and instead taking the country back. After hearing that, Jaime left Cersei and the Lannisters to travel north and defeat the dead. In season 8, Jaime finally arrived back at Winterfell 7 years after his last visit. Jaime would be reunited with Brienne, and the two would finally have sex and make love, and Jaime would make Brienne a knight. Jaime would also be reunited with Bran, where Bran basically implied to Jaime that he was going to die. More on that later. Jaime would help the whole round defeat the White Walkers once and for all, and Jaime planned on going to King's Landing but stayed in Winterfell with Brienne. However, after reflecting, after what Bran told him, he didn't realize that Cersei was going to die, and he knew he was going to die, so he wanted to die with her. And after he left Winterfell, he was taken captive by Daenerys, only to be released by Tyrion in order to get King's Landing to surrender. And it would work. Cersei and Jaime surrendered only for it to be too late, as Daenerys began burning down King's Landing. Cersei and Jaime would be reunited one last time as they hugged and kissed as the Red Keep crumbled around them and crushed them to death, ending the life of Sir Jaime Lannister. Once again, thank you guys so much for getting my channel to 75k views. This is incredible, and I never thought this was possible. Yeah, this is absolutely incredible. If this at 100k views, I'll probably do a video on the life of Robert Baratheon, but that doesn't matter. Thank you guys so much for 75k views, and until next time, bye!